Okay, everybody, before Tony gets started here, I want to introduce Rob Steele with Pratt & Whitney of Canada. And they have a slide also. Yeah, thanks, Tony. Sorry. Let's see. Where'd you put it?
Pratt & Whitney connected. Page, Hi, people. Sorry to interrupt. Before we begin, I just wanted to announce myself is Robert Steele with Pratt & Whitney Canada. I have an exciting event that I want to announce. We're holding it at the Great Alaska Gathering a day before on the 2nd of May. It's called a Pratt & Whitney Connect. So we're connecting with the customers. This is a prestigious event because we only hold it 4 times a year throughout the entire world. And I've been pushing for Alaska for many, many years. So I finally got it this year. So this is amazing. It's an event that, it's the only event in North America that's happening this year in Alaska. And the other 3 events, there's one in Germany, one in Abu Dhabi, and the other one's in Singapore. So it's a pretty good event. Now, what this event entails is we're bringing up a lot of people. We're going to have our MRT, Mobile Repair Team technicians, show up. We're going to have marketing, sales, as well as myself, engineering, and digital engine services. Now, we're bringing up 2 live engines. One is a cutaway engine, a display cutaway engine, and then we're bringing up a live workable engine. We named it Bertha. It's a 67 Bravo engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation, and then we're going to go to the live event. So we're going to do a live engine bore scope inspection with tips and tricks on how to do it. And then we're going to do a live hot section inspection where we're going to actually split the engine, pull the parts off and explain the various components on how to inspect and what we're looking for, and then we're going to put it back together. Now, this event is going to be on May 2nd. It starts at 1. It's going to go to 5. And then afterwards, we're going to have cocktails and hors d'oeuvres from 5 to 7. So we're going to have a lot of people there. It's a live event, and we encourage you to participate. It's free to all customers. May 2nd, so it's the day just before the event, and it's being held at the fairgrounds in Palma, Alaska. There's a QR code. There's a little sheet on every table. You have to register to participate in the event. It'll take you 2 minutes to register. You can register with your phone. That's why we put the QR code in. And if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. This is an amazing event, so hopefully we'll get to see a lot of people. Just let you know that we announced it yesterday, and already we've had 24 people register. So hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Tony, you ready?
Hello. Hey, is there a cap to how many people you're going to let? I'm just kidding. I don't need to go, but.
We're going to have a large tent. We anticipated about 100 people, but if it gets bigger, we'll probably accommodate.
Okay, thank you. That was the one question I came up with in that 2 minutes he spoke. My name's Tony Alsworth with Alaskan Aircraft Engines. Supposed to talk to you guys for an hour. I'll do my best about anything piston engines and accessories. So I brought some show and tell that probably afterwards, if anybody wants to, I'll just grab my bag and head to the back. And if anybody wants to look closer or put hands on what I'm talking about, for me, pictures and books and all is really good, but there's nothing like actually putting your hands and doing stuff. So I brought some show and tell so you could do that afterwards and to help me explain on some of these things I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to go over, and it's been probably, I think, 5 years since I've spoke at one of these events. Some of this you may have heard before. It seems like I'm trying to talk about things that I get a lot of phone calls on. So I decided to talk about prop strike inspections.
Good, John?
This is what I'm going to cover.
Yeah, that might be a little loud, but yeah.
I'm just going to dive right into it. So on Continental engines, people always want to know what the criteria is or what's required, and you're going to want to go to your standard practice maintenance manual, the M-O manual. And the long and short of it, I don't know. Yeah, it's okay.
It's running and you hit
basically
something.
the engine comes apart just like overhaul. It's complete disassemble, and the amount of work is the same. Where everything has to be stripped of paint so you can do proper non-destructive inspection on it. Bushings are pushed. Typically, they're a little bit easier than overhaul because hopefully the engine is in better shape. So when it comes to the visual and dimensional inspection, hopefully we're not rejecting as many parts, but that depends on the life of the engine and how it's been treated. And you never know what you're going to get into. I would say the most common thing to be aware of when you're going to send an engine in for a prop strike inspection is you're probably going to be getting a new cam and lifters, because if there's any borderline question or it's a part and that's the time to do it. Even when the guy calls and goes, oh, it's only got 300 hours on it, and I've had it for 6 years, there's still, you just never know. It's, they might be good, and if they're good, we happily put them back in. But once we inspect it, if there's a question, we're going to replace it. And I tell the same people related to cam and lifters, same thing when you're going to do a cylinder change. People will bring me a cylinder and say, hey, overhaul this cylinder. And lots of times I can look at the piston skirt, and when you see little specks in a piston skirt, looks like pepper in there, lots of times that's cam and lifter. So just if you're going to do a cylinder change, I tell people, number one, don't pull the cylinder unless you're sure it needs it. If it's borderline, it's still in limits, and everything's great though, works good, I'd probably leave it on there, because the second you pull it, if you see the cam and lifters are bad, now you're changing the cam and lifters. So, I mean, by all means, if it's below limits, you know, for safety and you need to pull it, you need to pull it. But just always be aware and take a good look at your cam and lifters before you proceed with a cylinder overhaul. Wrong way. All right, so Lycoming basically has the same criteria as Continental as far as what Lycoming recommends. There is a Lycoming AD that
We had a prop strike, all you had to do was pull the accessory section.
I miss? Change the
Those days are gone. Nothing yet.
However, I don't know how that AD ever came about or what the actual history is behind it, but in all my years of doing prop strike inspections on Lycoming and Continental, I don't think I've ever found a crank gear cracked. So what Lycoming recommends and what air carriers have to do is this bulletin right here, 533C, which is going to mandate a complete tear down and, you know, stripping the paint pretty much identical to overhaul, just like a Continental.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, what I plan to do is kind of at the end of each little, I think I'm only talking about 3 different things here. So at the end of each section, I'll open it up for questions so that we can hopefully keep our questions on track while my mind is located at that track. So both, what do I got here? Oh. Both Lycoming and Continental applicability, all gear-driven accessories must be overhauled and replaced. So at a prop strike, because sometimes people will send in an engine and they'll pull the mags, and they'll, for whatever reason, they pull parts off of the engine. And you just want to be aware that basically everything gear-driven on Continental and Lycoming engines, the magnetos, if it's a gear-driven fuel pump, prop governors, vacuum pumps, anything that is gear driven needs to be overhauled or replaced. And that's, you can, I mean, it's easier to find on some of in the fuel system manuals, prop governor manuals, but I mean, you can find it through all the different manufacturers are going to want their components replaced or overhauled. The big thing with insurance, I just tell people, you know, I want people to be sure that they're going to get all the money out of their insurance if they have insurance. So people will bring me an engine, for instance, after a prop strike, and it won't come in with the prop governor or vacuum pump, which is typically correct at engine overhaul, or if you were doing an exchange with the factory, if you sent those items to the factory, you're never going to see them again. So they should be removed. But during a prop strike, those 2 things need to be overhauled or replaced. And my shop has the ability to overhaul prop governors, but I just like to remind people, whether they're using me or not, if I don't ever see them, you guys want to be sure that because they're gear-driven components, take advantage of your insurance and don't just set the governor aside and the vacuum pump for when you get the engine back from me and put those back on. You want to get those overhauled or replaced. Okay, before we move on, does anybody have any questions on prop strike inspections? I tend to agree. I'll say one thing. Almost every phone call I get where somebody had a prop strike, unless it's like an airplane totally crashed, it's always, it wasn't that bad, every single time. And they'll go, I don't know how many stories I sit and listen to of how it happened, what the RPM was at, what angle the prop, so I know what you're saying about when you back into, and I've had that too where, somebody's taxiing by and they hit the wingtip, hit the prop bad enough to damage the prop. And, unfortunately there's common sense and there's lawyers. And the two don't always go together. And so usually I opt to stay away from lawyers and I'm going to do it by the book. There's common sense that goes, yeah, obviously, it's not like the gear train, went from 2,800 to 0, it was prop, but when you're going to get lawyers involved, that's kind of that would be the owner's decision, I guess, before you call me. I would say probably no. On Lycoming, change the bolt in the crank gear. Correct. Anything else? What's that? Certain parts do kind of still have a supply chain issue. For a while there, when COVID went off for a while there, it was really bad. But most stuff is picked back up. But Continental still has problems getting crank shafts, but they're getting out engines quicker, which doesn't make sense. And then specific cylinders from both Lycoming and Continental have seemed to. I had 2 cylinders. I do a lot of R44 engines, and I had 2 cylinders show up. And my office asked me, they said, we ordered these 15 months ago. And my question was, well, where's the other 4, and they're still coming. So fortunately, we've kind of gone back to old school on certain models, where we're having to overhaul the cylinders and put them back into service. But for the majority of engines that we're doing, you can still get new parts. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to move on to starter adapters, and it seems like we could talk a lot about starter adapters. The big thing with starter adapters, and this is only relevant to Continental engines, mostly all the large bore, almost everything's got some sort of starter adapter on it, but if you're working on any 470, 520, IO 550, IO 360, whether it's like a F, a D, a per mold, a B, you basically have 2 different style starter adapters, and I'll hold them up here. Clearly the base is different on it. And I think in one of my pictures here, oh, something's fancy, look at that. Okay. I don't know if we're gonna make it stay or not. Okay. Let me see, I have a better picture. Okay. Here's probably your best picture, although the picture's not the greatest, where you can see the difference of what I was showing you. And so figure this thing out. Oh. Okay. So this is what's called the new style, and you can see the spring kind of right where the arrow is. That's your spring. And this is the old style. You cannot see the spring. That's a sleeve. The spring is inside of there. And quite a few years back, I can't keep track now. It used to be new, like 15 years ago, but it's not new anymore. But But these gears, Continental went from this gear to that gear. And you can see the thickness difference. And it's somewhat deceptive because the gears are undercut differently in them. So it's not quite as drastic as what you see, but it's drastic enough to where you can get an interference with the crank gear, which I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but like I say, you can look afterwards. And what can happen, I did several inspections over the years for people where they're start finding safety wire in their oil pickup and in their metal in their filters, and they basically cut the safety wire off of the crank gear bolts, holding the crank gear bolts on. And I've seen it where it's rubbed about halfway through crank gear bolts. So obviously that's a problem. In the two, let me see what I go back here. So the things you need to know, Continental basically mandated shortly after they changed to them that everybody uses this gear now. So any current production overhaul shop that wants to abide by all the rules, myself included, and even most field overhaulers are probably going to know anything you get from the factory. Like I said, probably 15 years. Is Jason here? I saw Jason Lukasik earlier. Oh, he would know. It's okay. Anyway, I mean, probably 15 years ago, they went to that gear there. So ever since then, anytime somebody wants to change a starter adapter, you have this question, well, what do you want? What do you need? A lot of people don't know. And from the outside of the starter adapter, they're both identical. So, I mean, there's no part number difference. All Continental did was took and pushed the sleeve out of these to produce a new style. So when you're looking on the plane, everything looks 100% identical, because all you're going to see is where the starter's at, right? You pulled the starter and you go, what do I got? Well, there is a way you can tell, kind of. Because the internal parts are different. So the only difference is this shaft is going to be sticking out of an old style. This shaft is going to be sticking out of a new style. They look identical. They stick out the same amount. The only difference is there's a snap ring, which I don't have the snap ring on here. There should be a snap ring on there. So if you pulled your starter, conceivably you could look and go, oh, it's got a snap ring. It should be a new style starter adapter. 90% of the time, you're going to be right. Because I've never seen any approval for it, but people will put the old style setup in a new style starter adapter, which works perfectly fine, but it's not right, and it can throw you off and screw you up if you're trying to use that for your determining factor, whether it's a new style or old style. So lots of times you won't know until you pull the starter adapter off. When you do, what you'll find, so the difference between the new and old style, people, why is there a new and old style? So there's two different springs here. The smaller, thinner spring, which, like I said, you guys can look at these afterwards, I call the slinky spring. That's the new style. And then the one over here by my pinky is the old style. In the new style one, especially with MT props. This one happened on our test stand with our wood test club on there. First pop off, it kicked back and broke. So they have a tendency to break anywhere in their spring system. And the other thing that where they can break is right here. There's a tab and a set screw that goes in there. And that's a real weak point on these. Even when they're functioning well, over time, these are slowly bending, and we see these tabs just break off. And at that point, it can free spin, and they usually will start riding down on the crank gear bolts. I've never made a big deal of it or thought of it much, but I was thinking of it the other day. It seems like a good maintenance thing to do for anybody running new style starter adapters would be to plan to just overhaul the starter adapter at 1,000 hours, or approximately half life, to negate that problem. Trying to think here. Yeah, I mean, if you guys are interested afterwards, you guys should look at these springs and come feel the difference between how strong one is and how weak the other one is. And the advantage to so why'd they come out with a new one? I don't know. The advantage to the newer one, which is, like I said, it's probably been out 20 years now, is it will grip easier because it's easier to bend. So it will, when the gear turns, it grips fast. New style starter adapters work fine. They can go TBO. The biggest thing with new style starter adapters is you need to hold the key on, because when you get that kickback, and you guys might get away with it 10 times. It might do it one time, but I guarantee you, if you're getting many kickbacks and you have a new style starter adapter, you will be replacing it. I do get guys, I just had one last month. Somebody bought a factory remand. I got it in my shop, took the crate lid off, took off the new style starter adapter, bolted on one of my overhauled old style starter adapters, and sent him out the door. That was what he wanted. But he's not the only guy I do that for. And anybody with a 185, I would definitely want to do it for, because I don't want to, changing starter clutches on 185s is not fun. Not fun on anything, but at least it's doable on 206s and 207s. But a 185 is just a lot more work. Okay, before we get into SureFly, what kind of questions do we have on Continental starter adapters? No, there's just no mass inertia. They slip less? The new style? Possibly. Like I said, they definitely grip easier. But the thing with the old style starter adapter is, I don't know that I've ever seen one fail in any manner other than it will start slipping. And usually if you got 10 different pilots flying that plane, it might go a long ways before it's caught. But if you got a pilot that knows what he's doing, or he's the same guy using the plane, it's probably gonna slip 10 to 30 times, 10 to 30 starts probably, before it actually, you're not gonna get anything. So you're gonna have a warning that it's slipping. Usually with a new style starter adapter, the warning is, it cranks and you let off for whatever reason, or you thought it started, or backfires, whatever, prop went back, oh, no big deal. And you go, zoom, zoom, you're done right then. So, like I say, they can work well, and I do have operators that use them, and I always just tell them, make sure to tell the pilots to hold the key on until you know it's running, because anytime it's kicking back at all, you're fatiguing that tab location or the spring itself. Anything else? They don't seem, I haven't really seen any effect. I haven't seen any that cause any problems to the starter adapters, with the exception of when lightweight starter adapters first came out, they would, and I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago, an old style starter adapter, in order for it to disengage, it has to have the spring pressure release. And when they first came out with lightweight starters, they wouldn't let that spring pressure release. And in that case, it could burn up the starter adapter on the first flight, because it would be trying to stay engaged. But all of the manufacturers, any lightweight starter you go buy today, it's new out of the box, will work fine with either of them, unless somebody comes up with a new lightweight starter that stops. It took them about 5 years to figure out that problem, but then they all figured it out and started making them so they'd let stuff disengage. It's a good question, yeah. Anybody else? And I did bring, again, I did bring the 2 different gears so you guys can put hands on gears if you want. Yeah. Say it again. I got friction modifier and what else?
Some owners really like oil modifiers. Have you seen any difference with the starter adapters?
Yeah, you want to put some sawdust in there? Is that what you're talking about? I think it was 1550 that my dad was really not a big fan of. But again, that was 20 years ago, and they don't seem to need a friction modifier. When they're built correctly and working, they work good. On the old style, the way the old style fails is they may slowly wear down, but you don't need to add friction to that scenario. But typically anytime they start slipping, it's due to wear that has taken place, but I can't think of anything you should be adding, other than oil. And I really can't speak to any oil that I've seen consistently causing a problem with either one of them. All right, so we're going to move on to the SureFly electronic ignition systems. Anybody ever heard of these? Yeah. Anybody installed them yet? Good. You guys might know more than me. No, we've maybe installed 6 at our shop now. So, my big caveat with this would be, like anything new, do your research. What happened with me when we first started getting into them, where there were things I couldn't make sense and I couldn't find literature on it. Of course, I don't always spend a lot of time looking for stuff. It depends. So I ended up getting a hold of the tech support, which was very helpful, and they were able to answer my questions, and I kind of just started my own little SureFly book. But these are 2 things to get started if you want to start learning about them. Are these 2 Lycoming service instructions? One gives you applicability, where you can put them, and then the other one is the installation operation. So the OEM ones, which I brought one of these you can look at afterwards too. The OEM ones are black, made also by SureFly, but don't say SureFly anywhere on them. And then the SureFly ones are blue, absolutely identical, almost, but they're blue. So when you're going with the nice thing about the OEM ones is if they're approved, it's my interpretation is that it's a logbook entry. When you go to the SureFly, the blue magneto, then you're going to need to do a 337. And my biggest thing that I learned, let me see where I'm at here. So my biggest thing that I learned between the 2, actually I'll jump ahead to that since I'm going to start talking about it. Basically, the first set I installed were SureFly. So I thought, we did all our research, read it, learned how the dip switches work, which one reason I brought this, because when I was reading about it, I could see them in the picture, but I couldn't picture in my mind exactly how big they were. So afterwards I brought this so you guys can come look at the mag and see the size of the dip switches. But these switches control the timing of the mag. And what I wanted to show you, I thought I had it down on Surefly, and I like to double check and re-engineer things as they come apart on things that I've never worked with before. So we had put a Surefly mag on several times, and I knew the dip switch setting, which was right here. If you looked at the fixed, on the 25 fixed, I mean, it's basically using Morse code ... .. So if you go to the same setup on the OEM style, now it's ... how many did I say? ... dot. And I thought, wait a minute. I mean, because I have my Surefly book, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to just set it. But when I took this one off of an engine that was there for a prop strike, Surefly mags cannot be overhauled. At a prop strike, they have to be replaced because nobody's overhauling them. So that's one thing. Mags you can overhaul or replace, but you can overhaul them. These are just mandatory replacement. So the thing to be aware of is there is a difference in the dip switch setting between OEM and the genuine, or the ones with the black from Lycoming. They function the same. They both work fine when they're set correct. And you just want to be sure if you're doing the OEM one, you want to use that service instruction 1569. That's where that one picture is from. And if you're using the blue Surefly mag, you're going to want to use the installation information that comes with that. So one cool thing about these mags is basically they're acting as an impulse mag anywhere below 400 RPM. So, because I was wondering how can I get rid of my impulse mag, right? Because for a while, all these electronic mags that were coming out, the Electro Air, you still had to have your impulse mag for your starting scenario, and then your electronic mag. So these ones are automatically set to go to 400 RPM, and to the best of my knowledge, that has nothing to do with the dip switches. It's preset, and these will also have where it talked about where it talked about the variable speed or fixed pitch, or not fixed pitch, sorry, but fixed timing. Thank you. They'll have these manifold ports on there. And I've actually never done a full engine to airframe install because I don't hardly ever do installs anymore. But we ran them on test stand using a 9-volt battery. And I mean, from everything I can tell, I think it's going to be a good system. I like the fact that supposedly you should no longer need 500-hour inspections, and you're just going to replace it at engine overhaul. And they're usable on Continental and Lycoming. I don't know. I've just done mostly all Lycomings with them, so I couldn't tell you. I don't even know about. I know they are usable and applicable to Continentals. I just don't know which ones yet because I've never used them. Like I said, this is all kind of new to me. I just kind of wanted to get it out there because I thought it was interesting to me that there were different dip switch settings. And so does anybody have any questions on the Surefly that I may or may not be able to answer? Yeah. No. In fact, look. Oh, yeah. He said, do you need different tools to adjust them to the engine? No, but you're setting it at top dead center instead of whatever the timing, 25 is a common one. So the installation itself, like turn the gear, slip it on, you have the rotating ears, all that is the same. The one thing with them I would tell you is if you've ever, looked for the E-gap on mags, you sit there, you roll it through until you see the points go out or hear your buzzer box or whatever. And the window on this is like 1/16. I mean, you can roll past it and never even know it and go, where is this thing? So you just got to sit there and roll real slow because it's a lot tighter window than your typical mag. So on the installations, and you can have the same problem with impulse mags where you put and it's real common on 320s on Cubs because of where the mounts are at, where you put your gears on, torque them, put the cotter pin in, you go to install it, and no matter what, you can't get it to open, and you need to take the cotter pin out, turn the gear 180, and reinstall it, and then you can get it. So you can have the exact same problem with these, but what Surefly's done and talked about, and I don't even know, I have the ECI gears that are double slotted, but they talk about the necessity of possibly needing the double slotted gear, which I have needed before, and that just lets you get your timing if you can't get it one way. And all you can do is try it one way, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you got to take your cotter pin out and redo it, and stab it again. Okay, what questions do we have on that? Again, that maybe I may or may not be able to answer. Yes? If you're replacing an original impulse, all the gears are the same. I've never, so the mag, like all the internal workings of the mag itself are the same, whether you're putting it in the impulse location or the non-impulse location. If you're putting it in the impulse location and you're leaving the adapter on there, like a lot of Lycomings have, the spacer, right, where the impulse is, you buy one of these that's made for that location and it comes with a longer rotor. But the thing is identical. You could also take off the adapter and put in the shorter studs, and then you're back to not needing an impulse Surefly mag. All it has is a longer rotor. Does that make sense? So, and truthfully, I've never installed an impulse one of these yet, but I'm guessing that you're correct. On an impulse gear, the mag is different. Rob has the answer, but no. But I'm pretty sure that you'll find that on the one that has a longer rotor in it, it's going to take the same gear. It won't take the impulse gear. It'll just take the same gear. Does that make sense? That's what I figured. I mean, some things are common sense and they roll that way. Like I said, I haven't seen one yet, but it would make sense. They just made the shaft longer, but to stick with the normal gear and get away from that slotted impulse gear. So all you have to do is be able to watch the light. Oh, wait, good. I told you, they probably know more than me. Hang on, because I've never done an annual.
So with the Sureflies, those are the only ones I've done. I've never done the Lycoming branded ones. They have a timing light and they have a timing stud. You put a screw with your 9-volt battery and you can check the timing light that way. There's in that manual, there's a whole procedure. It's available online. You can get it at the Surefly website. I'm sure Lycoming has their website with their manual or that service bulletin, service letter. As far as the gears, typically I haven't done an impulse coupling one because we put them on our IO 200 on the Diamond, and you just take the gear off the old mag and swap it on. Yeah, just goes right on, cotter pin. Oh yeah. As far as the Surefly, our diamonds had a very poor starting success rate, I would say, and they didn't start very well. Just the design of the cylinder for that, it cups a bunch of fuel in there, and once we put the Surefly mags onto that airframe and engine combination, it was night and day difference. They started like that. The spark is a lot hotter. You get quicker fuel burn, so you don't flood the engine as quickly. And with the variable, which you can set on the Surefly, you get a little bit of better fuel economy. Nothing super noticeable though.
So they're using it on the Continental IO 240. I've ever only installed them on 320s and 360s. Are you guys using it on both left and right? Only the right. So you still have an impulse. Okay. Okay. All right, interesting. No operator error related to why they won't start, right? On the Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, the okay. Yeah. Yep. So, okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, like I said, these are new to me, and I just wanted to pass on some of the stuff that I've been learning on them. And like I say, you can come look at this so you can see the dip switch, how they are and how you adjust them based on I don't know if this will come up, but based on the dot. We're done. Okay, it's okay. It's all right. Any other questions? And I mean, I could take any questions at this point related to anything aircraft engine. Yeah. The factory engine that I just did a prop strike on at 400 hours from the factory engine, I think it had both. Oh, the question was, can you only still use one of these? And I believe that you have to have another backup battery system, but I'm pretty sure that you can use both if it's approved. I actually thought if I might get that question, but I didn't have time because I did this slideshow a while back, and I didn't have time to review that work order and see, but I'm pretty sure that it had two on there, and that was what threw me for a loop, was because this mag was on the impulse side, and I thought, how are they doing this? You know, if it's for retarding purposes, and so at least on Lycoming, which it would be in that service instruction that was up there, 1449 or whatever it was for the application, it would be in there, I think. Any other questions regarding anything piston engine? No, I can't say that I have. You what engine do you have? Not on helicopters. I don't know. I mean, the one thing, and you're just running normal aviation gas. you know, I will say it's interesting, like all the R44 guys, they have to, and they're faithful to do their valve wobble check. And then you go to the fixed wing side, and nobody does anything. So, I mean, if you wanted to try to be proactive or try to catch things before you have issues, you could do that. And you'd probably be catching, you know, finding your issue that way instead of, you know, when you start having a rough running engine. I mean, you go into all these different leaning techniques and, you know, all these carbureted engines now that everybody has all of their CHT and EGT and all of their fancy lights. And I mean, a bunch of the data you can't argue with, but I just know that a lot of the way that planes used to operate before all of that information became available, they worked fine. And so I think there's kind of for instance, if you're the guy that has you've had 500 hours on this thing, it's ran perfectly fine, you've never had any issues, you're excited because you just put $3,600 worth of your new instrumentation in there, and now you can see, oh man, for 5 years, well, it's been running perfect, I've been running it wrong, you know, and then you start adjusting stuff, and oh, now, you know, 2 years later, hey, I'm getting sticky valves, and, you know, it's like, well, why did you, you know, yes, they're telling you something, but if you started with something good, even though you have all those parameters, you know, it would be good to at least know where you started at, and you know what your gauges were indicating, and then go from there, and see. But I mean, and every engine is different, so yeah, it's pretty hard to tell. It's pretty hard. I hear a lot of different ways that people can run their engine, and usually I tell them if it's been working great, keep doing it. You know, whatever it is. I hear all different concoctions. People mix this percentage with that, and you know, they've had the same. You know, they've gone through 2 engines, they've both gone TBO, no sticky valves, and I'm like, well, keep doing that then. You know, so anything else? I think maybe thanks to the Pratt & Whitney guy, I almost made my hour. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I'll load up all my stuff here, and I'll just go hang out back here for 5 or 10 minutes, and if anybody wants to come put hands or take a look at any of this stuff. Oh, you know what, the one thing I didn't mention, so the thing with the starter adapters, because everybody's still going to have the thicker crank gear if it's a current production engine or current overhaul, and you want to go to this style so you don't have a spring break on you, and especially if you're, you know, the new style starter adapters, if you're running a metal prop, you know, you'll probably be fine. Hold the starter on, that's the key. Use the key. And then if you're gonna have an MT prop or any lightweight prop, you better go to one of these. You will go to one at some point, let me put it that way. You'll either go to it when it breaks and you're frustrated, or you'll go to it right off the bat. I was at MT Prop Shop in Florida, and the guy said, oh, I never have a problem. And I said, well, you look and you find out, and I guarantee you that you're running an old style starter adapter. And when he looked into it, he got back with me and said, yes, he was running an old style starter adapter. I said, well, then you will never have a problem. But anyway, the fix to this. So because you have the interference fit, which a crankshaft has end play, it has an allowable amount of end play. In fact, it's a good pre-flight when you walk up to your piston engine to grab your the hub of your prop and try and go fore and aft. It should go clunk, clunk. That's good. But that clunk, clunk is also end play that allows those crank gear bolts to get closer to this. So there's too many variables. You can sit there and you can measure, like you could take this off and you could measure how far your end clearance is, how far your crank gear bolts are coming back from the deck height of the crankcase, and then measure this, and you could calculate and see if you're going to have an interference fit. Some of them will clear, just barely, but they'll clear, so you may not need anything. However, this is my own, I don't know, I got PMA on this like 15 years ago, a long time ago. Whenever this problem came out, we started seeing all these engines come in with like 5 gaskets stacked on them. And I'm like, this is not good. So I came up with this shim, or whatever you want to call it, and it just takes a normal gasket on either side, and it spaces it back to OEM clearances that the old style had with this gear. So basically you go back, you're with the new style gear, with the old style starter adapter, and a spacer that puts you back at the correct clearance. So the whole thing to know, when it comes to starter adapters, they're pretty straightforward. I get a lot of people, I run out. I mean, I buy cores from the lower 48, anywhere I can find them, because I sell old style starter adapters probably 10 to 1. And most air operators up here, they know that they want the old style starter adapter. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast. And that's what I would have on my own. So anyway, if anybody wants to look at any of this stuff, I'll be in the back, and thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Rebecca. I'm the Deputy Director of AACA. I was at another training this morning, so I apologize not being with you. But we're going to take just like a 5-minute break and let the other guys get set up, and then we'll go ahead, and I believe it will be Chris Campbell coming up.